and the team of people that are presenting. So if I may formally kick off our online presentation regarding the Baltic M&A Monitor 2023. We have been doing this for almost 10 years or so. And the reason we are doing this monitor is that, well, Alex, as many other law firms, if not all the law firms, we are reporting our transactions to the merger market, which we consider the leading deals corporation that is keeping track on what's happening in the transactional market. And we have always been curious to receive some feedback as well as to how the Baltics look from London and what is happening in Europe in the transactional world and globally as well. And well, another aspect of why we are doing this Baltic M&A Monitor is that we probably know what's happening in our respective countries in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. But I'm not sure whether we are very familiar what's happening in our neighboring countries, meaning as an Estonian, I'm not sure whether I'm on top of the transactions happening in Latvia and Lithuania. So this is the reason we have been putting together Baltic M&A Monitor for years and years with the assistance and in cooperation with the merger market. And I have an honor to introduce our speakers today. We will kick off with Agne Mažeika, Baltic correspondent of merger market, and then Alex team, Sven Papp talking about Estonia, Raimond Slaidins about Latvia, Paulius and Ruta Armona about Lithuania. And we are all heading in our respective countries the M&A and the transactional practice in our firm. So we believe that at least we can cover our own country. And then once the country presentations are done, we will have a few words and discussion about what can be expected, what we can expect from 2023. And then we will have questions. But let me kick off with Agne Mažeika. Agne, if you could take us through how the Baltic market looks in figures and how the Baltic market looks from looking at it from London. The floor is yours.
Sven. Thank you, Sven. Greetings to you all and happy Tuesday, of course. So today I will walk you through the main M&A figures for the Baltics last year with the help of some slides. And the key message throughout is that last year has been strong in terms of M&A despite various crises and challenges that we faced last year. So the first slide shows that a total of 117 deals worth 2.2 billion were announced last year in the Baltics. It is a drop by 19% in deal count and a drop of 7% in deal value compared to 2021 when 144 deals worth 2.4 billion were logged in. However, the M&A activity in 21 was rather unusual exception, especially by deal count over the past decade, and the table illustrates that pretty well. Also worth adding a reminder that merger market data includes deals that exceed euro 5 million in deal value, and value figures only include publicly disclosed deal values. And since I'm throwing a lot of numbers around, so here are a few more. So another detail is that 59% of all deals in the Baltics were announced in the first half of 2022, which probably points to growing macroeconomic pressures in the second half of the year. Also last year, 53% of all deals announced in the Baltics were domestic, which is a similar level to 2021 and indeed over a slightly longer period of time. Inbound deals meaning those made by foreign investors, on the other hand, contributed the majority of aggregate value in the Baltics last year, 78%, down slightly from 85 in 2021. Now let's check how the Baltic figures compare to European and Central Eastern European M&A activity. So next slide, please. Yeah, this table shows that deal count dropped by 4% in Europe last year, while aggregate deal value declined by 20% from euro 1.2 trillion in 21. However, just as in the Baltics, 2022 was still a very strong year by historical standards, with the second highest deal count and aggregate value over the past 7 years. Next slide, please. Moving closer to home now, the Baltic deal volume share in the CE declined slightly year on year in 2022. Baltic M&A generated 16% of the total CE activity in 2021 and 14% last year. So you can see the numbers and how much in deal count CE generated last year. I can add that these 730 deals were worth close to 38 billion in 22, with deal count down by 4% year on year and deal value down by 22%. Yet again, as elsewhere, this remained a strong year by historical standards over a longer period of time. Let us now have a closer look into the Baltic M&A figures. So this table shows that almost half of all Baltic deals announced in 22 involved Lithuanian targets, up from 33% share in 2021. Estonia contributed roughly more than a third, with Latvian deals making the remaining 16%. I will briefly now touch upon each market. Next slide shows that although Lithuania's share in the Baltics grew, the market itself had slightly less deals announced last year, 56 versus 62 transactions in 21. But both are actually high numbers because the annual average in Lithuania stands at 19 deals over the pre-pandemic decade. Lithuania also had a sizable increase in deal value compared to 2021, but as previously noted, this is always a bit arbitrary. The next slide is on Estonia. And compared to Lithuania, Estonia's M&A market saw a slightly steeper decline in deal count last year, 42 down from 57 in 21. Deal value decreased from 1.7 billion to 1.3 billion last year. But again, historic track record suggests strong deal making last year. Latvia is the next slide. Yeah, thank you. Latvia recorded a decline to 19 deals last year from 25 in 21. However, it avoided a year-on-year drop in aggregate value, and it stood roughly at more than 230 million in last year and also in 21. Let's now check the top 10 Baltic transactions. The next slide. Yeah, thank you. So you can see them listed. I can maybe point that taken together, the two largest deals in the Baltics, the fundraising round by Estonian Bolt and Blackstone's share increase in Luminor, accounted for more than 40% of the total value in the Baltics. Or, well, you can count it yourself, but it's more than 950 million combined. And another interesting detail maybe is that 7 of the region's 10 biggest deals in 2022 had foreign investors, and 5 of the 7, including the 2 largest, involved US bidders. Next slide is on active sectors in the Baltics. So this shows that TMT, again, was the top sector in terms of both deal count and value in the Baltics over the past 2 years. This is over the past 2 years. It contributed 1/3 of all M&A by deal count in the region and accounted for more than half of the announced value. It was followed by energy, mining, and utilities, or rather maybe we should use energy and utilities term in the Baltics. And the biggest decline in deal count over the past 2 years was recorded in industrials and chemicals compared to 2019-2020 period of time. The biggest value drop was seen in the financial services sector. However, the Baltics accounted for 20% of all financial services deal count in CE and 19% of all TMT transactions in CE. The next chart is on active sectors in Europe. It demonstrates that TMT, just like in the Baltics, generated most deals last year and was the leading sector by deal value. It was followed by industrials and chemicals and business services. Energy, mining and utilities, which was the second most active sector in the Baltics, trailed slightly behind in Europe by deal count, but stood out by deal value. I will conclude now my presentation with a slide on Baltic private equity activity, because it was one of the M&A drivers in recent years. So this slide shows that the space saw 31 deals announced last year, which is a decrease by 26% from 42 logged in 2021. But again, it was a strong year for private equity space, given that before the record year of 2021, the highest number of Baltic private equity deals in a single year was 19, and that happened in 2020. Also, aggregate private equity deal value declined last year, falling by 30% to 1.4 billion in 2022, but it was higher than average over a longer period of time, with one exception in 2018 when it was similar at 1.4 billion also. So basically, this concludes now my presentation, and I thank you, and I'm giving floor back to Sven. Thank you.
Thank you, Agne. This was a lot of numbers, but a very good picture what has been happening during the past 10 years. So if I could have the Estonian slide now on. Yes, it's a little bit recapping what Agne told us. Well, in Estonia, the first 2 months of 2022 seemed to promise another record year for Estonia. But then, of course, Ukrainian war changed the total picture. And well, I have to admit that the majority of the transactions in Estonia actually happened during the first half of 2022 and contributed to the deal value of slightly below 1 billion, as the second half only contributed 400 million. There was a drop in both in the number of deals from 57 to 42, and we're talking now deals that have been reported and accepted by emerging market, and the deal value then dropped, as was already told us by Agne, from 1.7 billion to 1.3 billion. Can I have a next slide, please? Okay. Well, what I'm very happy to announce, although the deal numbers and the values dropped in 2022, still the top chart of 10 biggest Baltic deals in 2022, 5 out of those 10 were actually Estonian deals. And you can see them on the screen. Bolt, of course, topping in every sense with the deal charts. Sunly attracting 200 million. HK Scan, I will come back to this deal in a while. 90 million. Verif attracted 89 million, and Ready Player Me, our avatar creators, attracted 56 million. Can I have the next slide, please? Of course, the Estonian highlights, it's not exactly M&A. It's a mixture, but well, Estonia is still going stronger with the startups or the companies that used to be at least the startups, and attracting capital. And this is the list of the top players that managed to attract most of the capital. And as said, Bolt clearly topping the list, and then Veriff, Starship, Ready Player Me, Glia, Aurora, 3 Commas, Katana, and Monese following. Each of them, as you can see, attracting significant amount of capital. Another sector we mentioned already, TMT, Agne mentioned it, is, can I have the slide back? Yes, we can see from here that actually Sunly is a representative of another very active sector, and that is energy and renewable energy above all. On the top 10 chart, there was also the Lithuanian Ignitis, also proving that energy sector is another sector that is going strong. And well, the third sector obviously is fintech, that is also going very strong in, I believe, at least in Estonia and Lithuania. But Ruta will tell us a little bit more about those sectors later. HK Scan Mark deal, as promised, a few words about that as well. Well, it is, to start with, it's always very pleasant and feels every Estonian proud if we can buy back something that has been sold to the foreign investors some 20 years ago. I can recall that we were at that time involved in on the purchaser side, on HK side, but now after 20 years, well, the Estonian capital has been feeling strong enough to buy back the company, and at a significant price as well. Another reason why it is a rather significant deal is that we have been used to see a lot of deals and high value deals in the tech or TMT sector, but this is in a blue chip industry, and there are not too many deals happening, and definitely not many deals of such size. And that is definitely a sign that local capital is strong, and in a difficult environment is maybe more active and agile than the foreign investors. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. Well, I thought that our presentation regarding Estonia would not be complete if we were not to talk about the IPOs. As you may, or at least some of you may remember, 2021 was the record year for IPOs in Estonia, more than 20 listings, most of them on the alternative First North exchange, but nevertheless, 2022 was more modest, but well, the capital markets in Estonia were not dead at all. 6 IPOs, 5 SPOs, and 3 bond issues. The total amount of capital that was attracted from the market was 108 million, of course, compared to the total deal value in Estonia, deal value of the larger deals that get reported to merger market. This is maybe not such a significant amount, and telling us clearly that most of the listings were on the alternative market and not at the very high values. But what is not in the statistics, apart from the bond issue, is the Estonian state with its bonds worth 1 billion. And well, another maybe interesting factor to mention, the interest on the bonds that the Estonian state has to pay was quite a shock from the previous bonds. It was 4 times bigger than or higher than the previous ones. And if people recall it, then it's 4%. Okay, but I believe this concludes the Estonian part, and if I may pass over the word to Raimond, and if you could share the highlights regarding Latvia.
Hello from Latvia. And happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I'll be happy to speak about the situation in Latvia last year, the highlights of last year. We had in an overall perspective, although there was a 24% decrease in deal volume, as we note in this slide, it still historically was a good year as far as the Latvian numbers are concerned. It would be good to have numbers more in the range of Estonia and Lithuania. We tend to lag in terms of the amount of these type of large deals in our country. I'm not exactly sure the reason why. We keep hoping that things will catch up with our colleagues in the coming years. But historically, it was still a good year. And we had actually a bit of an increase, a tiny increase in deal value as opposed to deal volume. It's notable that a lot of the activity that we're seeing that we saw last year in the market in terms of deals that were done, as well as potential deals that we saw percolating in the market both last year and the beginning of this year, are in the renewable energy sector, but also activity in the TMT sector, which was it was an active sector as well, as Agna pointed out earlier. IT, of course, also still an active sector. Next slide, please. Okay, and we'll go through a few of the specific deal highlights that we saw in Latvia last year. The largest deal that we saw last year was actually our neighbor Lithuania's Ignitis Group acquiring a portfolio of Latvian solar projects for 213 million euros. Again, renewable sector, which, as I mentioned, is really a trend that we've been noting and we still see. And this was actually in terms of the Baltic list, this was the third largest deal in the Baltics. And we're still, as I said, expecting to see many deals in this sector this coming year. The Telia acquisition, this is TET, the Latvian telecommunications company TET, acquired Telia Latvia from Telia. This was a large telecommunications transaction here in Latvia, and will add on significant capacity to TET moving forward in the future. And then this Nordigen transaction was an interesting transaction. This was in the IT sector. Nordigen is an open banking platform that was developed here in Latvia. It began as a startup, and it was acquired last year by the UK-based Go Cardless, which is a global leader in direct bank payments. And this will certainly has been noted by Go Cardless as something that will really add to their regional capacity across the Baltic and European markets. Okay, moving forward. Next slide, please. Draugiem Group. This is one of our large startup companies in Latvia. And they bought a e-commerce cosmetics company, Prime Prometics. That was worth noting. They've been quite active in the market. And then what's a company that's really been in the news lately is this Aeronis, a Latvian company that makes robots for the maintenance and inspection of wind turbines. It's very notable in the market at this point. They're doing quite well. They're servicing a lot of the wind turbine industry in many different countries. They secured 30 million euros in growth capital this year. which was a significant figure for them. And we have Clean Air Group, which was Latvia's environmental services sector company, which acquired RSC Norma, operating in the field of construction waste container retail. As well as Clean R Group also issued 3-year bonds in the amount of 15 million euros, also noted in the market here. Next slide, please. And 3 other highlights that we wanted to note. In the fragrance field, we had Turpaz Industries, which is a global company developing flavor and fragrance extracts. It acquired a Latvian company, Lori, which is engaged in the marketing of and production of perfume extracts. That was a very nice deal. And Gren which has been active in the energy sector in Latvia as well as across the Baltics. They concluded the acquisition process of a company called Energia Verde, a green energy producer in Riga that operates a biomass combined heat and power plant in the Riga region. And then finally, notable in Latvia as well was this MAG Group transaction that Sven already mentioned, which impacted in Latvia as well in a significant way. Okay, well, that's the run through the Latvian highlights of 2022. At this point, then I'd like to hand it off then to Ruta and Paulius speaking about the Lithuanian market.
Thank you, Ray. So regards from Vilnius, and I'll be happy to start an overview on 2022 for M&A in Lithuania. So speaking of 2022, I think there was a great momentum in the M&A activity after a record-breaking 21, an impressive achievement given the pandemic and other global challenges. So the start of 22 in the Baltic markets looked very promising until the war broke out. Back then, it was safe to say that those factors that contributed to the record M&A market in 21 will remain influential for deal making in 22 as well. Interestingly enough, the first quarter of 22 across the Baltics was even better than the first quarter of 21, while the decline in the deal activity started with the second quarter onwards. Well, but we could take this into the perspective of the last 5 years in Lithuanian M&A market, then last year, according to the data that we heard from Agne and Major Market, was far better in terms of deal volume than 2020, 2019, or 2018. So in terms of the number of transactions, the record year of 21 could not be repeated due to a number of objective reasons. Although the first quarter of 2022 did not seem to slow down the pace, but the war that started in Ukraine caused a major escalation around the potential security crisis in our region. At the same time, the markets entered a negative macroeconomic spiral. We all know, like high inflation, rapidly rising energy prices, interest rates. Naturally, these factors had a significant impact, not only on the confidence and sentiments of foreign investors regarding the prospects of the country's and region's economy, but also on their M&A plans for 2022. Some of these plans have been adjusted, while some of the newly planned acquisitions were postponed until better, or if you like, more stable times. Fortunately, not all of them, because most investors did not pause the already started M&A projects and decided to continue them. However, with a few exceptions, such as North Securities' $100 million USD investment that gave birth to Lithuanian's second unicorn, we'll talk about this later. These were relatively medium-sized deals that collectively dominated through 2022. On the other hand, the full house of mentioned negative factors also had an impact on valuations and started correcting the prices. Sellers had to accept the new reality and lower EV/EBITDA multipliers, which may, depending on the industry, already have shrunk by 2-3 annual EBITDAs. The decline in values poses an additional challenge to the forecast of the transaction activity this year, quite naturally, as it always takes time to calibrate the expectations of the sellers and the buyers when the market situation changes. And we will be seeing this year as well. It is interesting that in 2022, over 50% of all announced transactions, measured not by the value of transactions, but by their number, in the Baltic states were domestic transactions. While foreign investors see growing opportunities in the region, there's also a strong demand for deals from domestic investors, including companies, as well as growing number of private equity funds, venture capital funds, and family offices. Although many local deals are under 10 million or so, they remain significant for the local M&A market, reflecting the increasing need for the local Baltic companies to grow through M&A and create opportunities to participate in larger deals later on. So speaking of the notable Lithuanian deals, I would be more than delighted to talk about the Nord Security transaction. Nord Security, as many of you know, is a global leader in internet privacy and security solutions. Raised the first ever outside capital at 1.6 billion valuation, making it second tech unicorn in Lithuania. This financing round of 100 million was led by Novator Ventures with participation from Border Principal Investments, General Catalyst, and some other investors. Now, Ruta will tell us more about Kevin, which is a Lithuanian fintech startup, and we have a good reason to believe that's probably the next Lithuanian unicorn that provides an advanced account-to-account payment infrastructure that primarily aims to replace costly card transactions. They raised 65 million in Series A funding. And the next slide, please. Another very interesting and notable transaction that took place in 2022 was around nano avionics, where US-based company AST Space Mobile sold its controlling stake of Lithuanian space technology startup to Kongsberg Defense and Aerospace, a company controlled by the Kingdom of Norway that also operates in the field of defense and space. I cannot tell a bit more about Litolit, which is also quite a unique notable transaction, not because of the value of the transaction, which was not that sizable, but because of the reason that this investment came from Taiwanese investors. So Litolit is Lithuanian femtosecond laser technology startup that received Taiwanese investment from quite sizable Central and Eastern Europe investment fund from Taiwan. Interestingly enough, last month, the same Taiwanese fund announced a 3.5 million Series A investment into Oxipit, which is an AI-driven medical diagnostics startup. And by the way, for those of you who are not aware, two other Lithuanian companies that have secured capital injections from Taiwan were solar power module producer Solitech, which announced 8 million euro credit from Taiwan's Exim Bank. And second is Internet of Things company Teltonika, which signed a 14 million euro deal with Taiwan's Industrial Technology Research Institute to share semiconductor chip technology. I think that's a great kudos that go to Lithuania here. So that would be it for status on Lithuania. I would then ask Ruta to jump in and walk us through about the startups.
Thank you. So thank you, Paulus. I would like to ask to go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to give you some statistics related to VC investments in the Baltics, so not pure M&A, as we say. So these investments were taking a leading role in M&A and investment transactions in 2022. And those funding rounds were led by global VC players. And those VC players actually are responsible for 90% of value of the investments in regional startups. And the success behind this is probably because we had a highly skilled workforce, and our governments are working very closely with investors to secure and to create a very friendly business climate. For example, in Lithuania and Estonia, the governments have changed the corporate law so that startups can attract funding more easily. And of course, these countries remain economically stable, which is extremely important for foreign investors. So in total, 2022, in the Baltic states attracted 1.6 billion euros, which is 15% lower compared to 2021. However, the difference is not so big. Also, we have to take into account that some of these funding rounds were started in 2021, meaning that the valuations were higher. We had M&A peak. We have peak in VC investments. So probably the picture could be a little bit different this year. Well, the main industries that we see investments coming to are enterprise software, fintech, mobility, and we already talked about the unicorns in the Baltics. So in total, we have 13, 10 in Estonia, 2 in Lithuania, and 1 in Latvia. And now let's look at the funding rounds. So these numbers are given in US dollars because I just wanted to give you a full picture of what is happening in the Baltic states, because some funding rounds were raised in euros and some in US dollars. So it's just to compare. Talking about Estonia, we see the numbers are really great, and Estonian Mobility as a Service provider, Bolt Technologies, had the biggest funding round. It's 670 million US dollars, led by Sequoia Capital. Then there is Veriff. Also, Sven told us about Glia, which also, like Veriff, became a unicorn in Estonia. And the interesting transaction is related to Starship Technologies, which attracted 42 million US dollars from VC funding and also 57 million US dollars from European Investment Bank. In Lithuania, we are looking, of course, we have Nord Security. Paulus already told us about this transaction. So 100 million US dollars, great. And Nord Security became the second unicorn in Lithuania. We have Kevin, which secured 65 million US dollars, Little, which is a great transaction because it is expected that it might become a gateway for Taiwanese companies to European market and vice versa. So it might open new markets to Lithuanian and Baltic companies as well. There is one transaction which is not mentioned here. It's MailerLite. It's a Lithuanian startup which was acquired by the Polish company Vercom for 84 million euros. And the significance is that it is the biggest exit of Lithuanian startup to date. Talking about Latvia, so Raimond's already told us about Irons, which secured almost 39 million US dollars funding. Giraffe 360 also raised a significant amount of money, and it's great because actually Irons and Giraffe are deep tech companies. So if we look at these transactions and we try to see some trends, so we see that Lithuania has developed a strength in fintech and cybersecurity, and Latvia and Estonia have shown impressive results in deep tech, such as Irons, Giraffe 360, and Starship Technologies. It's actually not very easy to talk about these investments because the vast majority of Baltic startups are headquartered locally at the pre-seed stage. However, when they move to seed stage and especially Series A, they usually flip to other jurisdictions such as US or UK. And of course, we have Bolt Technologies, which is still headquartered in Estonia. It's a great example that VC funds are still coming to the Baltics, and they rely on our jurisdiction as trustworthy. And next slide, please. So in total, we are talking about around 1.6 billion euros investment. And it was, well, the number is approximate because, the numbers are still coming. And we are talking about 124 deals in total. So Estonia had 70 funding rounds, Lithuania had 31, and Latvia 23. So the trend is still that Estonia is leading in VC investments. And these investments, the biggest investments, were led by tier one funds such as Index Ventures, Axel, Atomico, Burda, Tiger Global, and some other. But of course, we also have very active local players such as Chain Ventures, Karma Ventures, Terra Ventures, Practica Capital, First Pick, Contrarian Ventures, and some other. And actually, investments from these funds should provide a sense of security in case global players are not so attracted to our market. And next slide, please. So talking about expectations. So probably enterprise software, healthcare, and defense are predicted to be the leading sectors in this year in 2023. Well, defense is a new industry because lots of money are flowing to this industry. Well, macroeconomic situation, high inflation rates, high interest rates, plus political tensions probably would create challenges for the startups seeking VC investments. And these tier one funds may have less interest actually in our market, and it might be harder for Baltic startups to raise funds in Series A and later rounds. However, it is expected that there will be more pre-seed and seed stages that are usually led by local players. So it's crucial to have strong local VC players, as we can see. What is also good in our ecosystem is that our startups are using capital very efficiently, and efficient use of capital will definitely be a prerequisite for any investments in any VC investments in 2023. So it might be another argument, how to attract global players, as focus has already shifted everywhere from growth to revenues and profitability. And our startups are always relying on these metrics. So we have to wait and see what's going to happen in the US and the EU market and how they're going to perform. And here in the Baltics, we are probably going to replicate the same trends. So thank you. And I'm giving the word back to Sven.
Yes, thank you, Ruta. And you already entered the last topic that we intended to discuss. It is expectations for 2023. Before giving a word to Paulus, maybe, Ruta, one question that I have been asked quite frequently is about the distressed assets. Of course, that is in traditional M&A, I would assume, but reflecting it to the startup world, are you predicting any down rounds, or is it the sector going this strong that it will ever increasing the valuations?
Yeah, probably we cannot talk about ever increasing valuations anymore. Probably it was a topic for 2021. Down rounds, yes, it is a hot topic, and founders should think if they want to accept a down round and get funding, or they should try to live on their own. And actually, there are some companies that let's say they cannot get VC funding, but they try to become profitable. So, and there are examples, how they can become profitable. So it's sometimes, it's a bit of luck, and sometimes, the market helps them. So, and there are also startups that are bootstrapped and they don't have VC funding at all, and they don't need it. So, I think it's more about revenues and profitability. And like I said, growth is probably not a topic anymore. It's not such a big topic anymore. And, depending what the startup is foreseeing, what is the expectation of the founder, probably we will see, different transactions. There might be some exits, but there might be some, just growth by from profitability, but not from VC investments.
Okay, thank you. And Paulus, what do you have to promise regarding Lithuania for 2023? We learned well, at some conferences that actually the dry powder, it's on the same level, expected to be on the same level as it used to be for the past 9 years. And somebody has calculated it being 1 trillion invested globally, with 1 trillion new money raised every year. So what do you think is going to be the Lithuanian share of that?
So, well, of course, I fully agree that private equity firms in particular still hold record amounts of capital that are ready to deploy it in acquisitions. So that's a good thing. Speaking of Lithuania, well, unlike in Estonia and Latvia, at least this is what I know from you, Sven and Raymond, the first month of this year was surprisingly active in Lithuania. So, but then again, it's absolutely too early to speculate on the trend. So last year began with similar intensity, as we all recall, but we all know what happened next at the end of February. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that first half of this year will likely be less generally active, as financial instability will continue to impact the M&A markets. Yet looking further ahead to the second half of this year and beyond, I think that Baltic region's historical resilience to economical turbulence may prove that deal making is likely to accelerate, and that the overall deal volume this year may be similar or close to 2022. In terms of the sectors, I think that I will not say anything new. I think that we all agree that the M&A activity will primarily be based on technology, renewable energy, and infrastructure. There are certain thoughts about the healthcare projects being on the pipeline. But what I also believe is that larger deals that were postponed last year because of the geopolitical tensions could possibly resume this year. So it remains to be seen. I also think that those international investors that are already familiar with the Baltic market will continue to look for new opportunities and add-on acquisitions that naturally, by creating synergy, would fit into the portfolio of already acquired businesses. The so-called confidence of the investors with their feet on the Baltic ground. And speaking of the diversity in terms of the international investments, I think that we might see less investments coming from US. Still, those regional investors, and primarily regional investors, I mean Nordic and Eastern European countries that are well familiar with our region, should continue investing here. So on another partly geopolitical note, I wonder if Taiwan is the new player in the Lithuanian market, as you know, after an escalation of the diplomatic dispute over Lithuania's relations with Taiwan. Or those few transactions that I mentioned represent just several investments, and they might be just one-off business cases. So time will tell which the case it is. Nevertheless, the economic outlook with Taiwan looks very promising, because there were 3 investment deals with Lithuanian tech companies signed just recently. Another very important forecast is about valuations. I think that, and probably most of us would agree, that valuations will continue to decrease, meaning re-evaluating the inflated valuations and correcting the prices. So the recalibration of the multiple to be paid for today's cash flows, and more importantly, expectations between the sell side and the buy side, will have to be aligned, which may take some time. I also believe that investors are going to be much more selective going forward, and a greater focus of attention on the deal process, and even more focus on the due diligence of the target before entering into the transaction. This will be the trend. In addition to customary areas of due diligence, I think that KYC and sanctions topics, such as sanctioned services, sanctioned goods, sanctioned entities, and individuals, increasingly will require scrutiny. And, well, any attempt to ignore this might lead to sanctions evasion. And this is what we believe from not only Lithuanian angle, but rather from the Baltic. But I'll be happy, Sven, if you also share your perspective and your views with us.
Yeah, well, quick comments to what you said. It was a very thorough insight to 2023. And, well, I believe the Baltic countries are not this different. Definitely, the capital is more expensive, and investors are more careful with selecting the targets. The sanctions issue and the general know your client or know your partner is something that is becoming is very topical and is becoming more and more topical. What we also see a little bit is that parties are more carefully negotiating the terms, and that means that the transaction takes a little bit longer than it used to be. What we have not seen, at least in Estonia yet, and everybody keeps asking, is the truly distressed asset sales. Well, it's difficult to say whether we will see and how much out of this type of transactions we will see. I have my doubts whether we will see in masses this type of transactions, but some, yes, may happen. But, well, not jumping in between with the Estonian outlook, Raimond, how do things look like in Latvia?
I am cautiously optimistic in Latvia. Paulius, it'd be good to get some of those Taiwanese investors into Latvia as well, and throughout the Baltics. Hopefully Estonia will see some of them as well as they move around the region. But seriously, unfortunately, I think the geopolitical situation has become the new normal now with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I think investors have dealt with that and learned to, include that in their investment strategy and accepted that situation. Economics, of course, challenges as in the rest of Europe, but I guess just based on what I'm seeing in this first month of the year, it's bubbling in terms of not necessarily all the deals are going to happen, but we've been contacted with regard to a number of potential deals in various sectors. Again, as I mentioned earlier, renewables seem to be still a hot topic and will continue to be so. We know of a couple potential deals going on in that area, and in the energy sector in general, relatively large deals as well. IT, we know of potential IT deals that are where there are companies looking to sell and looking for investors, and in the TMT sector as well. So I don't know. It's hard to say, and who knows if there's going to be some other issue that comes up during the first part of the year. But I think it's looking as if it's going to be a pretty active beginning, like maybe a couple months down the line now. But I think it looks. I'm relatively optimistic, like I said, with regard to the potential deals that are out there, and hopefully they'll come in.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have to admit that, can't say whether I'm optimistic, but at least I'm not pessimistic regarding the 2023. The environment is what it is, but looking back 3-4 years, it's actually amazing what the world has been going through. And 2021 was the all-time high for transactions globally and also in the Baltics. And the world has suffered through the logistics crisis, the COVID crisis, the high energy prices, inflation, now the interest rates, the war, of course. And the transactions are still very much alive. So no reason to believe that 2023 will be in any way different. Talking to the big players, some of them at least are very worried that the center of gravity of the global deals will be moving more towards the US and leaving Europe sort of aside for a while. But then, there are also voices that, that means that there will be more European deals. And I believe, if there are maybe not this high number of foreign capital involvement in the Baltics, which I still think is going to be quite significant, continuing to be quite significant, we will witness actually local private equity being increasingly more active, and the new phenomena for the past 5 years. So I don't know how new that it is any longer. The family offices, they have become really active in I believe in all 3 Baltic countries. So I'm also optimistic. The glass is absolutely half full, if not full, and looking forward to the bright future. I don't know whether there are any questions. We have a chat line open as well, but I have not seen yet any questions. Let's wait and see whether there will be any questions from our audience. I can see that the audience has been, on and off, but around 65 people. So it's quite a bit of interest in the Baltic transactions. Okay, I don't see any questions, which means that looking at the clock as well, it's 3 minutes yet to go. We were faster than we anticipated, but we will
very efficient.
Very efficient, yes. And we will not be abusing our viewers' time. We thank everyone. We thank Agne for making the presentation and for the cooperation that Alex has with Merger Market. And our report will be available on our websites as well as LinkedIn and Facebook and all the other mediums. And there will be links, I believe, distributed also to all participants as well to make it easier for you to find it. So thank you, everyone, and let us enjoy the sunny weather in the Baltics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.